For years, fans speculated about the chemistry between Courtney Hansen and Richard Rawlings. Whispers of flirtation, crossed lines, and behind-the-scenes drama never made it to air. But now, at 50, Courtney is finally ready to speak her truth about what really happened with the fast and loud star, what he asked of her off-camera, and how she truly feels about his glamorous wife, Katarina. Before the rumors, the tension, or the headlines, there were just two automotive icons rising in their own lanes, Courtney Hansen and Richard Rawlings. One was America's sweetheart of car television, the poised and polished host of Overhaulin, Power Nation, and Ride of Your Life. The other was the rebellious, whiskey-sipping, leather-wearing king of Fast and Loud, and the roaring engine behind Gas Monkey Garage. Their on-screen paths rarely crossed, but behind the scenes, their names were mentioned in the same breath more often than most people realize. The first time they were publicly seen together was at the annual SEMA show in Las Vegas, a magnet for automotive royalty. According to several eyewitnesses, including industry insiders and staffers at the time, something sparked between them almost instantly. Not necessarily romantic, but undeniable chemistry. The confident banter, the shared eye for sleek builds, the mutual respect as pioneers in a male-dominated industry. You could feel the energy in the room shift when they were near each other, one SEMA staffer recalled. It was electric, but also complicated. While Richard was known for his brash, take-no-prisoners personality, Courtney had built her brand on professionalism and grace. And yet, despite their differences, they kept showing up at the same events, the same interviews, the same after-parties. Fans noticed. So did producers. The whispers began. Is something going on between them? But it wasn't just gossip. Behind the scenes, Richard was reportedly intrigued by Courtney's poise, while she found his unpredictable energy both magnetic and unsettling. Two opposites orbiting the same spotlight, until the pressure and attention brought the truth into focus. This wasn't just a meeting of TV hosts. It was the start of a story that would unfold slowly, quietly, and controversially. After their initial meeting at SEMA, Courtney Hansen and Richard Rawlings started appearing together more frequently on industry panels, photo ops, and exclusive after-hours events that weren't televised but always had people talking. From LA to Vegas to Barrett-Jackson, their paths kept crossing, and with each new interaction, the flirtation grew harder to ignore. Multiple insiders recall moments that made even seasoned professionals do a double take. One crew member from a high-profile industry event said, Richard had this way of leaning in just a little too close when he talked to her. He wasn't crude, just confident, but you could tell he was testing the boundaries. Several colleagues recall playful banter that walked a tightrope between charm and provocation. Private jokes, lingering glances, and what many described as undeniable chemistry. At one media party, Richard reportedly asked Courtney to join him for a late dinner. She politely declined. Another time, he sent her Gas Monkey merchandise, supposedly for promotional purposes, but the handwritten note read, "You look better in this than anyone else I know." Courtney didn't respond. Still, their exchanges kept fueling speculation, and whispers in green rooms and press pits grew louder. Courtney, for her part, remained composed. She never encouraged the attention publicly, but she didn't outright reject the association either. As one producer put it, she handled it like a pro. But you could see she was weighing every word, like she knew even one misstep could change everything. It wasn't just curiosity, it was tension. And in the male-dominated, hyper-competitive world of automotive television, that kind of tension could be dangerous. What began as playful industry teasing was quietly inching towards something more complicated. Something that would later leave both of them with choices to defend. According to Courtney Hansen, the flirtation might have remained harmless until one moment shifted the dynamic completely. It happened during a behind-the-scenes meeting at a charity car show. Rawlings allegedly pulled her aside to pitch a crossover promo between Gas Monkey Garage and Courtney's brand. She was intrigued until the tone shifted. He said he wanted to do a private photo shoot, Courtney recalls in a recent interview. Nothing official, just me in Gas Monkey gear. But when I asked if it was for social media or print, he got vague, said it would be just for fun. Then he added something like, "Don't worry, it'll stay between us." That's when the alarm bells went off. She declined immediately. But the exchange stuck with her, and it wasn't the only time something like it happened. Over the following months, Rawlings reportedly sent her several late-night texts suggesting off-script appearances and unscripted content that seemed more personal than professional. Courtney later confided to a close friend, "I started to question if I was being toyed with or tested." She felt trapped between maintaining her reputation and navigating the blurred lines of an industry where powerful men often made women feel like opportunity came with a price. In the moment, she kept things civil. She didn't report the incident, didn't call him out publicly, but her perception of him changed. The man who once seemed like a cocky peer suddenly felt like a risk, not just to her image, but to her peace of mind. And while Richard Rawlings never commented on those allegations, those who knew Courtney say she started putting space between them, less eye contact, fewer conversations, and a new boundary she was determined not to let him cross again. In her most recent sit-down, Courtney Hansen was finally asked the question fans had been speculating about for years. Did she ever have feelings for Richard Rawlings? She didn't flinch. "Yes," she said, "but not in the way people think." She admitted that Richard had an undeniable magnetism, a rock star energy that drew people in. He was bold, confident, and absolutely sure of his place in the room. And for someone like Courtney, who had spent years fighting for space and respect in the garage scene, that energy was both intoxicating and exhausting. "He had this fire to him," she said, "and part of me respected it. But another part of me knew getting too close would burn me." She went on to explain that while there were moments where the chemistry was real, her instincts always kicked in. "I was too smart to act on it, too aware of what I'd lose if I did." Professionally, she admired his hustle. Personally, she questioned his sincerity. "There were times when I thought, maybe there's something there. But then he'd say something careless or cross a line, and I'd remember who I was and what I stood for." Courtney was never interested in being a side character in someone else's ego trip. She had built her own name from the ground up and wasn't about to let curiosity cloud that. Still, she admits there were moments, late at night, long after the events ended, when she wondered what it all could have been if things had been different, if he had been different. Not because she needed validation, but because she knew that very few people in her world understood the pressure she was under. And in Richard Rawlings, for better or worse, she found someone who at least understood the game. The text messages started as harmless, a check-in here, a casual comment there. But over time, Richard Rawlings' messages to Courtney Hansen took a tone she couldn't ignore. One night, after an industry event, he texted, "Wish we had more time to talk. You're always on my mind after these shows." Courtney didn't respond. Another message came a few weeks later. still think you'd kill it in the gas monkey world, in more ways than one. That was the tipping point. Courtney had always kept her professional contacts clean. She wasn't naive, she knew the way some men in the industry worked. But coming from someone with Richard's platform and power, the shift in tone felt calculated. He was probing, seeing how far he could push without being called out. In interviews, she describes it like this: it wasn't aggressive, it wasn't threatening, but it wasn't respectful either. And it made it clear I needed to shut that door. From then on, she started putting walls up. If Rawlings was at an event, she'd make her rounds and leave early. If producers asked about working with Gas Monkey Garage, she deflected. And while she never blocked his number, she made sure the conversation stayed brief and stayed professional. There's no evidence of anything physical happening, no scandals, no leaked photos, just a subtle, uncomfortable shift from friendly to suggestive. A shift that made Courtney realize she had more to lose than he did. Because in this industry, when things go sideways, it's rarely the man who takes the fall. The incident changed how she viewed not just Richard, but how she had to protect herself in a world that too often mistook boundaries for an invitation. At one point, it was more than just industry rumor. Courtney Hansen was allegedly in talks to co-host a Fast and Loud spin-off. According to production sources, the show would have focused on Gas Monkey collaborating with high-profile women in the auto world. Courtney was the first name on the list. On paper, it made sense. She had the credibility, the experience, and the camera presence to elevate the show. But behind the scenes, Courtney had already made her decision. She politely declined. I couldn't align myself with something that made me feel small, she said in a recent interview. I knew the spotlight would always shine on someone else, and not because they earned it, but because they demanded it. For years, Courtney had carefully built a reputation based on skill and integrity. Joining a Gas Monkey production, especially under the lingering awkwardness with Richard, felt like a compromise. One she wasn't willing to make. She wasn't bitter. She just knew better. Courtney also worried what it would signal to young women watching. If I say yes to that kind of dynamic, if I pretend it's okay to work alongside someone who doesn't respect my boundaries, what message does that send? That quiet, firm no may have cost her screen time, but it preserved something far more valuable. Her peace, her self-respect, and her control over her own narrative. Producers tried to sweeten the deal. More creative control, more money, even a solo spin-off down the line. But Courtney didn't flinch. When someone shows you who they are, believe them, and then keep moving. As whispers swirled about her decision to avoid Fast and Loud, the backlash came quickly and quietly. Message boards lit up with speculation. Tabloids ran thinly sourced stories about a secret romance between Courtney and Richard Rawlings. Reddit threads dissected every old photo of the two standing side by side, zooming in like internet detectives searching for proof of a scandal that didn't exist. But the cost wasn't just digital noise. Behind the scenes, Courtney found herself needing to prove, yet again, that her success wasn't based on looks, proximity to fame, or unspoken favors. I felt like I had to defend my entire career over a rumor I never asked for, she said. Even brand partnerships grew cautious. One major sponsor paused negotiations after seeing her name in gossip headlines. Another backed out entirely, citing reputation concerns. It was a lesson in optics. A woman's professionalism can be undone by a man's proximity. And the industry, Courtney realized, was still deeply flawed in how it processed female ambition. So she doubled down, took on more builds, launched her own projects, turned down shows that didn't offer her equal footing. And little by little, she clawed her narrative back. People will talk, she said. They always have. But I'd rather they talk about the cars I build, the teams I lead, and the legacy I leave behind, than about who I did or didn't flirt with in a photo. It wasn't easy. But Courtney Hansen never took the easy road. And in that choice, she found a deeper kind of power. The ability to walk away without ever having to explain why. Courtney Hansen has always stayed graceful when asked about Richard Rawlings' wife, Katarina. But in a rare, unguarded interview, she finally opened up. Not with bitterness, but with something far more revealing, empathy. She's stunning, Courtney said. Elegant, confident. And from the outside, it looks like they're living this dream life. But I've been around long enough to know that the spotlight only shows you what it wants you to see. For years, Courtney avoided discussing the personal lives of her former colleagues, especially when there was history or rumors involved. But when pressed about whether she believed Katarina knew about the alleged off-camera moments between her and Richard, Courtney paused before offering a strikingly honest reply. I don't know. And maybe she does. But here's the thing. What you tolerate when the cameras are off says more about you than what you post on Instagram. Courtney made it clear she harbors no resentment toward Katarina. She's not the problem, she said plainly. The system is. The dynamic where powerful men get to walk right up to the line and sometimes cross it because they know women are more likely to stay silent than make a scene. She doesn't know what kind of man Richard is now. People change. They grow up. Maybe he's become the kind of partner I always hoped he could be, just not with me. But her concern isn't about old texts or unspoken chemistry. It's about patterns. I just hope, she said softly, that she doesn't ever have to wonder what I wondered. Because that feeling, it stays with you. Courtney never called Katarina out. She didn't need to. Her words weren't laced with judgment. They were steeped in the quiet sorrow of someone who knows how heavy silence can become when you're expected to smile through it. When asked the question, fans have always wondered, do you ever think about what might have been? Courtney didn't rush her answer. She took a breath, looked down, and then said something unexpected. Yes, I think about it sometimes. I'm human. She wasn't talking about a fantasy romance or fame. It was more complex than that. There was a moment where we really connected. Two people who understood the pressure, the grind, the loneliness that comes with living your dream on camera. Courtney admits that in a different world, maybe something could have grown out of that connection. But even if the timing was different, I still would have walked away. Because for me, respect has always been non-negotiable. She doesn't paint herself as the victim, nor does she vilify Richard. What she describes instead is the quiet grief of a friendship that never got to be real, because the power dynamic between them wouldn't allow it. I wasn't afraid of him, she says, but I was afraid of what being too close to him would do to everything I'd built. My credibility, my image, my name. It's hard to admit that sometimes just being seen near the wrong person can cost you everything. What hurts more, she adds, is the assumption that she must have wanted the attention, that she invited it. People don't understand how exhausting it is to constantly be navigating someone else's boundaries while protecting your own. So does she regret anything? Maybe not what happened, but what didn't. I wish it didn't have to be this complicated. I wish we could have just been colleagues, maybe even friends. For years, Courtney Hansen kept her story tucked away. She didn't want drama. She didn't want headlines. And above all, she didn't want to be labeled difficult. I didn't speak up because I knew what would happen, she says now. The moment you say someone crossed a line, even just a toe, you become the villain in someone else's narrative. But turning 50 changed things. Courtney says she hit a point where staying silent no longer felt like strength. It felt like surrender. I realized I'd spent years protecting people who never once protected me. And I asked myself, why? She's not telling her story for revenge. There's no lawsuit, no takedown, just truth. Women in this industry walk a tightrope every day. We're told to smile, to be easy to work with, to take a compliment, even if it doesn't feel like one. But then we get punished for being too emotional when we finally speak up. Now Courtney is choosing a different path. Not louder, just clearer. I'm not here to cancel anyone. I'm here to reclaim my own peace, my own timeline, my own voice. She knows this will spark conversation and probably controversy. But she's ready. This isn't about Richard. Not really. It's about every woman who's ever been made to feel like her boundaries are negotiable. Courtney Hansen is still building, still leading, still standing tall in a male-dominated world. But now at 50, she's not just behind the builds. She's the one finally rebuilding what matters most. Her truth.